Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 286, You Said a Mouthful. The episode begins with Ash and the gang walking along a path on the outskirts of Rishin Town, hoping to arrive at Rustboro City so Ash could challenge the gym there, but instead, they spot a sign on the road that it was describing a gym. And Max read the sign and saw a silhouette of a Pelipper on it, and also reads the huge headline that said that the gym was unofficial. Ash wondered what the purpose of an unofficial gym would be, so he read the description of the gym on the sign for more details, and it explained that this unofficial gym supposedly had the strongest Pokemon in the world, used by the gym leader there, making Ash obviously super excited, wanting to challenge this super strong Pokemon, while May just wanted to see it. Max expressed his doubts that Ash would actually be able to handle the world's strongest Pokemon, but Ash was confident he could, so they went over further into the outskirts of Rishin Town, where they came across the front gates to the gym. Before Ash and the gang could enter, though, they were startled as a random-ass trainer ran out of the gym with a Pokeball in his hands as he cradled it, asking if his Pokemon was okay. And he then fell to his knees and sighed when the Pokemon didn't respond, realizing that they must have been still too tired. Ash was curious as to what was going on, so he asked what happened, leading the trainer to explain that he battled the world's strongest Pokemon in there, but his Pokemon had fainted as a result, and now was severely injured. Ash then explains that he was going to go challenge the gym as well, leading the trainer to warn him not to, advising Ash to go back, because if he didn't, he would surely lose. The trainer then ran off to go heal his Pokemon at the Pokemon Center, ranting to himself about how the battle wasn't fair, and the Pokemon the gym leader used wasn't normal. Brock believed what the trainer had said, advising that maybe Ash really shouldn't go and battle the strong Pokemon, as Max debated what kind of Pokemon could be so abnormal. But hearing about an abnormal Pokemon, of course, only made Ash more excited to challenge the gym, so he and his friends, who he forced to come with him, entered the gym. As soon as Ash enters the gym, the first thing they're greeted with is not the usual room, but instead the battlefield straight away. Ash didn't care though, as he merely just shouted that he wanted to challenge the gym leader and the strongest Pokemon, and on cue, the doors of a building on the other side of the battlefield opened, and a man, the gym leader, came out, wearing a wrestling belt, as he was followed by his Pelipper, who immediately landed from its flight next to its trainer's feet. The man, the gym leader, then introduced himself as Anthony and claims that he had never lost a battle and had won many small championships. He then admits that his Pelipper was the strongest Pokemon in all of existence, not even batting an eye at that statement. He was very confident about that, and suggested that Ash reconsider his challenge, threatening that his Pelipper would fucking decimate him. Although Ash only took a few seconds to think, as he reaffirmed that he really wanted to challenge the gym, wanting to earn a badge, although Anthony reminds Ash that he wouldn't be getting a badge since his gym was unofficial. Although confidently taunted that even if the gym was official, he wouldn't need to give out any badges anyways, since Pelipper could just defeat any opponent. As for Max's reaction to the Pelipper, he was disappointed, as he expected the world's strongest Pokemon to actually look strong, but according to him, Pelipper looked kinda stupid, not strong. Ash agreed, so he took out his Pokedex to scan the Pelipper to see if it said anything about it being super strong, and no, it just was like, oh yeah, it's Pelipper, there wasn't even that much special about it, I mean, it's just a Pelipper. Anthony then clarified that Ash wouldn't find any information on his Pelipper in the Pokedex, because his Pelipper was the only one in the world who knew a variety of different types of attacks. Not like most Pokemon, where they were limited to really one or two types. Like, you know how Pikachu basically just had normal and electric attacks? Yeah, well apparently this Pelipper had a variety of types of moves. Ash was surprised at this, and so was Brock, as he warned Ash that he should be careful, because that meant that he couldn't possibly predict what type of attacks Pelipper would use, simply based on its typing. Despite this, Ash thought that it would be a good challenge, and he may still be able to win and prove himself, so he still requested to battle, and Anthony accepted, confidently stating that he would only use Pelipper, but would permit Ash to use any amount of Pokemon that he needed in order to beat Pelipper. Of course, this was limited to the 6 that you could have on you at a time, but still, Brock was shocked at the cockiness of Anthony, suspecting that maybe Anthony could have been putting up a front and lying about his Pelipper's world's most powerful Pokemon status just to intimidate his opponent. The battle then began as Ash sent out his Trico to battle Pelipper. Trico first shot the twig out of its mouth as a warning shot, showing that it was confident, and Anthony made fun of Trico's confidence by laughing, taunting that a Pokemon's cockiness alone couldn't win the match. Trico would have to be good as well. Brock butted in, rebutting that Anthony was the one who was cocky, boasting about his Pelipper at all times, but Anthony responded that his Pelipper was actually good, so he had reason to be cocky, and explained that he would only let Trico continue to be cocky if it could actually prove that it was good, admitting that it did look relatively strong, as it stared down Pelipper, trying to intimidate it. May and Max were talking, waiting for the battle to begin, as May asked Max if he thought that Ash had a chance in the battle at all, and Max expressed his doubts, stating that Pelipper probably had way more actual battle experience when compared to Trico, judging by all the tournaments that Pelipper had supposedly won. And there was also the fact that Pelipper knew a wide variety of types of moves. Max further stated that the battle was going to be hard enough for Ash even without this, since Pelipper could already use 2 types of moves, being flying and water, because it was a flying and water type, but now the battle was just going to be even more difficult. They finally agreed with Max for once, and the battle finally began, as Pelipper started with a wing attack, flying up in the air and then doing a flip before going down towards Trico, which Trico dodged, leading Pelipper to turn around and try and go in for another attack. Before it did, Ash commended Trico on the job, and tried his best to think of a good attack to use against the Pelipper, since grass moves wouldn't do good against flying types, but they would do good against water types, and it was weird, because Pelipper was both. Ash eventually settles on Razor Leaf, which worries May, who remembered Max telling her that grass attacks weren't good against flying types, and she believed that the flying type weakness that grass types had would counteract with the strength that they had against water types. Max then commended May on finally being able to understand some basic Pokemon type knowledge, as Anthony laughed at Ash and told Pelipper to dodge, which it did. And Anthony then stated that Ash was now going to see Pelipper's variety of moves in action, as he told Pelipper to fly up, putting his own hands out in a flying position, as he told Pelipper to use Vine Whip and send the vines down from the sky. Pelipper did this as vines came out from its mouth, and Ash told Pikachu to dodge, but before it could, vines wrapped around Trico's leg as it attempted to jump away, leading the vines to pull Trico back and cause it to fall down on its stomach, almost knocking Trico out. Everyone, although especially Max, was extremely shocked at Pelipper being able to use a Vine Whip, as Max clarified that Pelipper shouldn't have been able to use a grass attack. Brock, on the other hand, was excited by Pelipper being able to use a grass move, as he really thought that Anthony was just blushing, but it appeared that it wasn't, and he was amazed that a Pokemon could use a move that wasn't even related to its type. Max realized that Brock was somewhat right, and although he still was immensely concerned as to how the Pelipper could have learned the attack, he admitted that it certainly was giving Ash the challenge he wanted. Speaking of Ash, he was currently panicking as Trico was almost down, and to make matters worse, Anthony instructed Pelipper to finish Trico off as it flew up into the sky and dragged the Trico by spinning the vines around through the sky, and then it threw Trico to the ground once again, fully knocking it out, leading Ash to run up to it and make sure it was okay as he recalled Trico, since it didn't respond. To get Ash riled up and angry, Anthony then taunts Ash, stating that Trico wasn't as strong as he was expecting. With Ash angered, Anthony tries to anger him even more by taunting Ash that he should just quit, while the rest of his Pokemon were still okay, claiming that no one could defeat Pelipper, but Ash was determined not to give up, wanting to take out his anger on the Pelipper as he sent out his Tailo. Anthony just laughs, claiming that a flying Pokemon would do nothing against Pelipper, rudely taunting that Tailo would be a great next victim, as he told Pelipper to use Wing Attack on it, leading Pelipper to fly after it and strike it, but Tailo dodged at the last second as it flew above Pelipper. However, Pelipper simply chased it, and a game of tag started. After a few minutes of Tailo being chased by Pelipper, Ash told Tailo to throw it off by doing a flip. It does this, and also ends up landing behind Pelipper, so it could go in for a Peck Attack mixed with a Quick Attack. However, before this Quick Attack or Peck could do any damage, Pelipper used Flamethrower to knock Tailo out in one hit, shocking absolutely everyone, especially Max, who stated that just like with the Vine Whip, Pelipper wasn't a fire type, so it shouldn't have been able to learn Flamethrower. Ash thought that something was weird as well, but May simply told both Ash and Max to study up, claiming that this Pelipper must have just been a rare fire type, and was shocked that Max didn't know about a rare fire type Pelipper, leading Max to assure May that a fire type Pelipper did not exist. Max was essentially having a mental breakdown, coming to the conclusion that the only possible way Pelipper could have known Flamethrower was if Anthony was able to teach Pelipper it somehow, but he knew that this wasn't plausible, so he was just confused out of his goddamn mind. Anthony advises Ash to give up again, assuring him that he would never win, but Ash still refused to give up as he sent out his next Pokemon, Pikachu, who would be his last option, as he only had 3 Pokemon currently. Pikachu was as eager to battle as Ash, wanting to find out what the fuck was up with this Pelipper. Anthony then tells Pelipper to use a Thunderbolt on Pikachu, which of course shocks everyone again, especially Max, at how Pelipper could use electric attacks despite not being close to an electric type at all. Max then got even more surprised as he saw that this Thunderbolt was a little bit different from your average one, and it had to be charged up, as Pelipper had to charge up a Thunderbolt inside of its mouth before firing it. This was odd since, for one, Thunderbolt never had to be charged up inside of anything, and for two, a Thunderbolt was never shot out of a Pokemon's mouth. Regardless, Ash just told Pikachu to strike with his own Thunderbolt, but Pelipper then released its charged up Thunderbolt, and both attacks collided, causing a huge explosion, and making both Pikachu and Pelipper fly back, knocking them both to the ground. Ash runs up to Pikachu to check on him, and finds that Pikachu had lost. However, he looks up and sees that Anthony was holding his Pelipper to check on it as well, and saw that Pelipper had been knocked out as well, so that meant that the battle was a tie. Anthony admits that it was in fact a draw, and states that his Pelipper must have just gotten tired, and suggested that he would come back for a rematch with Ash, and he would win, as he would teach his Pelipper some more powerful moves, and goes back into the building where he came from. What Ash and the gang didn't hear, though, was Anthony initially stating that he would get his Pelipper a more powerful Pokemon, before correcting himself to that he would teach it more moves. So, that kind of insinuated that there was more than one Pokemon at play during the battle, which could have explained the weird moves. But this didn't really matter, as Ash and the gang didn't really hear this, like I said, because Ash was too focused on Pikachu, noticing that it was really beat up. So he picked up Pikachu and tried to comfort it, but Brock suggested that a Pokemon Center would be the best course of action, and that they should take it to it immediately. So Ash and the gang headed for the Pokemon Center, hoping that Nurse Joy could treat it. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they had been watching the battle, spying on Ash and the gang, and as soon as Ash and the gang left, they immediately popped out from under the fence to get a closer look at Pelipper, with Jessie declaring that Pelipper was just the kind of Pokemon that Team Rocket needed due to its immense strength and variety of moves, so they wanted to capture it. However, James expressed his doubts that they would be able to capture it, since they would likely need a Pokemon more powerful than Pelipper to capture it, which they didn't have. However, Jessie simply reminded James that Team Rocket didn't need any extra help from Pokemon. They could just steal on their own, like they always did, reminding James that they always managed to steal with just their Arbok and Weezing, and now their Cacnea and Seviper. James reminded Jessie, though, that even though they were able to steal a whole bunch of Pokemon momentarily, they would always end up losing them, and suggested that it would be the same if they just went in to steal the Pelipper, without getting a stronger Pokemon first. Jessie rebutted that all that was needed to capture the Pelipper was a goddamn good plan, and ordered James and Meowth to come up with one. Meowth eventually did, but when he suggested that they just break into the building and steal Pelipper as the plan, James reminded Meowth that that's all that they ever fucking did as their plans, and their plans never worked. Even their pitfall plans that they did, those never worked either. They either just snuck into a building or they dug a pitfall trap, and all those times it never worked. Jessie argued that James should let go of the past, because she can now come up with an actual super great plan that was super secret, that no one else could know about, and it would for sure work to catch Pelipper. James and Meowth were intrigued by this, but Jessie simply stated when they asked to know what it was, that it was so secret that even she didn't know what it was, and assured them that she would inform them when she found out what the plan was, making James and Meowth annoyed at the fact that Jessie really just didn't have a plan, and she was trying to cover it up. They all got even more annoyed as Wobbuffet forcibly popped out of his Pokeball, forcing Jessie to recall it. Meanwhile, Anthony, inside of the building, which was technically the gym, Anthony was taking care of his Pelipper, trying to heal it up himself. And thankfully, Anthony was able to make Pelipper feel better, and he apologized to it for making it battle so hard, leading Pelipper to forgive him as it smiled. It was clear that Anthony just put on a tough guy, kind of bullyish act to intimidate his opponents, but he really did care about his Pelipper. Anthony's attention is then alerted to a noise outside, being the burner of Team Rocket's Meowth balloon, as well as Team Rocket yelling for him to come out of the gym, and he rushes out to notice the Meowth balloon. More specifically, he notices Team Rocket, who ordered Anthony to come over to them and give them Pelipper. Anthony angrily refuses and asks them who they thought they were to ask that question, stating he would never give up his Pokemon, as Team Rocket introduced themselves by doing their motto and demanding Pelipper once again, admitting that he would do very well on their team. Anthony refuses again and instructs the Pelipper to defend itself by taking out Team Rocket as it flies towards Team Rocket's balloon, preparing to attack. But Pelipper only sees Wobbuffet, as Jessie, James, and Meowth had ducked into the basket of the Meowth balloon momentarily and soon emerged, having protective suits on, which they claimed would protect them from any of Pelipper's attacks, not knowing what type it would use. Anthony doubted this and instructed his Pelipper to use Vine Whip. However, Meowth then pressed a button in the Meowth balloon to release a metal hand, and this metal hand came out of the bottom of the Meowth balloon's basket and grabbed Pelipper's vines and tried to pull in the Pelipper so that Team Rocket could capture it. But while Pelipper was being pulled by the mouth, this stretched its mouth and caused a Bellsprout to fly out of its mouth and fall to the ground. Jessie, James, and Meowth freak out, realizing that Pelipper must not have actually been able to use a Vine Whip, and instead it was the Bellsprout using the Vine Whip from Pelipper's mouth, realizing that Anthony cheated. You basically using other Pokemon inside one other one, so he was essentially using multiple at once. Anthony was freaking out as well, realizing that he had just been exposed, and realized that he had to try and defeat Team Rocket before they could expose his cheating to anyone else. Although since he was panicking so much, he couldn't decide which attack to use, so he simply just had Pelipper start using a whole bunch of attacks at once, including Thunderbolts, Flamethrowers, and Water Guns. Pelipper got confused as it tried to release all three of the attacks simultaneously, since Anthony didn't specify which one to release first, leading Meowth to joke that it seemed like Pelipper was having an identity crisis. Team Rocket then continued to laugh, not at Meowth's joke, but rather at how easy it would be to capture Pelipper while it was confused and firing all these attacks, now deciding that they wanted to take it for a punishment for Anthony's cheating with a Bellsprout. Team Rocket were so confident that they could capture the Pelipper that they threw off their protective suits, claiming they didn't need them anymore, and Meowth used the metal hand to grab Pelipper once more while it was distracted and tipped it over in the process, which causes a Magnemite and Magby to fall out of Pelipper's mouth as well, revealing that Magby was responsible for the Flamethrowers and Magnemite was responsible for the Thunderbolts. With Pelipper caught, Team Rocket goes down to taunt Anthony, with James and Meowth yelling at Anthony for cheating and stating how wrong that was, and informing him that all of his wins in the tournament were not actually legit since he cheated for them, making Anthony sad and ashamed, claiming that he never wanted to cheat really, like he didn't do it with the sole intention of cheating, he just wanted to have the most powerful Pokemon. Meowth and James then turned their attention to Jessie, realizing that she hadn't scolded Anthony yet, and questions why, leading Jessie to admit that she actually liked Anthony's cheating and thought that he was genius for using multiple Pokemon in one, making Meowth and James collapse in shame, ashamed that they were friends with someone as rude as Jessie. However, James and Meowth were pleased, as Jessie clarified that although she did admire Anthony's cheating, she felt that he was showing up Team Rocket and her own bad attitude by doing so, so she actually hated Anthony for this, and proceeded to blackmail him, stating that if Anthony didn't let them take Pelipper, then Team Rocket would expose his cheating ways. Anthony begs Jessie not to, explaining that would ruin his reputation as having a super strong Pokemon and being a super strong trainer. But Jessie simply states that if Anthony didn't want to be exposed, then he would have to give up Pelipper, as well as Magby, Bellsprout, and Magnemite, so that they could use all of Pelipper's quote-unquote attacks. Anthony unfortunately saw no choice but to concede to Jessie's demands, as he instructed Pelipper to make sure he obeyed Team Rocket. Pelipper obviously didn't want to, as he felt very uncomfortable around Team Rocket, since they had just captured him, leading Anthony to apologize to Pelipper, but standing by his orders for Pelipper to obey Team Rocket, as he and Pelipper hugged one last time, as permitted by Jessie and James, because they loved to see how sad Anthony and Pelipper were to part with each other. Meanwhile, Ash and the gang had made it to a Pokemon Center, and Ash was waiting in the ER for Pikachu to heal up, thanks to Nurse Joy's help. As for May, Max, and Brock, they were sitting on a bench, waiting for Pikachu to come out of the ER, although Max had other things on his mind aside from Pikachu, particularly trying to figure out how Pelipper could have possibly learned all those attacks that it shouldn't have been able to learn. Coming to the conclusion that Anthony had to have been cheating in some way. Even though Max's conclusion was correct, May obviously didn't believe Max, as she simply stated that Max probably just didn't have all the knowledge to know that Pelipper actually could learn those attacks, which made Max angry. As for Brock, he was of course trying to figure out how Pelipper could have used those attacks as well, and suggested that May might have been partially right. Max just might not have had all the knowledge. This made Max angry, but Brock calmed Max down by stating that even though Max could have gotten all the general information right, Pokemon were mysterious creatures, so a lot of the times they could do shit that just didn't match up with the data. Though quickly second-guessed himself. This conversation was then interrupted, though, as Brock, May, and Max heard a cheerful beep coming from the ER, which signaled that Pikachu was now better. And inside the ER, Nurse Joy presented Ash his Pikachu, explaining that it was in perfect condition now. Just then, as Ash was happily reunited with Pikachu, May rushed into the ER to tell Ash about something, informing him that something was going on out in the main lobby of the Pokemon Center. So, she and Ash went out there with Nurse Joy, meeting up with Brock and Max, and saw that several trainers had gathered in the center and were talking to each other about how they had fought an extremely strong Pelipper, apparently the strongest Pokemon in the world, with rare attacks, but apparently, when they all lost against this Pelipper, they all had to give the Pelipper's owner, named Anthony, their own Pokemon. Ash, noting how Anthony had been quite a dick to him, remarked how he thought that this was totally something Anthony might do, but Brock, on the other hand, believed that Anthony may have been tricked, and someone may have been faking his identity, reasoning that if Anthony was going to start stealing people's Pokemon, he probably would have done so long before, since the gym had been open for quite a while, so why would he just start stealing now? Ash and gang then go outside to investigate to see if they could find any more information, when they suddenly saw a whole bunch of trainers having gathered at the front of the center as well, also in front of Team Rocket, who were disguised as announcers, who claimed they were hosting something called the Pelipper Exhibition matches, where trainers could challenge their powerful Pelipper with rare attacks, and if anyone could defeat their Pelipper, then they would win a prize. The prize being none other than the Pelipper, although Jesse and James did warn the trainers that if they ended up losing, then they would have to pay a punishment, being giving Team Rocket their Pokemon instead. Meowth then taunted all the trainers that there'd be no chance that they could win, but Jesse and James told him to shut up, explaining that if he said that, then that would just scare all the trainers off, and then they couldn't steal any Mons. Fortunately for Team Rocket, a global trainer with a Zigzagoon showed up and requested to battle Pelipper, with Jesse and James, of course, happily accepting. The battle then began, with Pelipper being told to use Razor Leaf, as well as a flamethrower by James, with Pelipper of course still able to do these attacks, since the Magby and Bellsprout were still inside of its mouth. However, Jesse reminded James not to forget to order Thunderbolt as well, since Magnemite was still in Pelipper's mouth as well, so James ordered a Thunderbolt as well. As soon as the trainer with the Zigzagoon sees all these attacks spew out of the Pelipper, he freaks out as he doesn't know what to do, literally abandoning his Zigzagoon as he runs away from the Pokemon Center area. As Meowth taunts him by laughing and waving goodbye, allowing James to finish off the Zigzagoon, defeating it with the 3 attacks. And then, since the trainer had abandoned his Zigzagoon, James could now claim it as Team Rocket's. Eventually, after a few more battles, with all those trainers being defeated, there were soon no more trainers left standing outside the Pokemon Center, aside from Ash and the gang, but they were hiding behind the Pokemon Center now, spying on Team Rocket, like Team Rocket would usually spy on them, because they weren't sure how to stop the Pelipper, and they were trying to come up with a plan. So, Team Rocket retreated to Anthony's gym, hoping that more trainers would see the sign there and come and challenge the Pelipper at the gym. How was Team Rocket able to go to the gym without Anthony interfering, you may ask? Well, let's just say they had dealt with Anthony when they took his Pelipper, but we'll get to that later. Anyways, Team Rocket told Meowth to stand just outside the gym battlefield to look out for any incoming trainers, when Meowth happened to spot Ash and the gang approaching, because Ash and the gang had now come up with a plan to stop Team Rocket. Although they of course didn't know that Team Rocket was Team Rocket, they just thought that they were some sketchy announcers. But regardless, they were now ready to come and stop them, and they had saw them go to the gym, so they had followed them there. Meowth went to warn Jesse and James about this, but he saw that they were busy messing around with a box of Pokeballs hidden at the back of the gym. He questioned what Jesse and James were doing, leading Jesse and James to explain that they had found this box of Pokeballs behind the gym, and realized that Anthony had even more Pokemon that he used to have the Pelipper learn even more attacks, other than the Bellsprout, Magby, and Magnemite. And declared that with all of these Pokemon, along with all the Pokemon they had taken from the other trainers, they could make Pelipper even stronger by having it use basically any attack at this point, thanks to the amount of Pokemon they had. Meowth then finally managed to warn Jesse and James that Ash and the gang were about to arrive, leading Jesse and James to suggest that they could use Pelipper's new power to capture Pikachu for themselves, preventing Jesse and James from worrying about Pikachu whatsoever, since Pelipper would be strong enough even to handle it with all of the Pokemon if they put a whole bunch of Pokeballs in its beak, which they did. So now, Pelipper was filled to the brim with other Pokemon that could use attacks. As Jesse and James declared that Pikachu would never defeat them again, unlike all the many times that it had before, Meowth reminded Jesse and James that they couldn't just put the Pokeballs in Pelipper's beak, since the Pokeballs would require opening, so he suggested that they should just put in some released Pokemon from the Pokeballs, like Anthony did. However, Jesse and James then got an idea, as they grabbed Meowth and put him inside Pelipper as well, much to Meowth's dismay, as he complained about this. However, Jesse and James explained their reasoning for doing this. Essentially, they were going to have Meowth open up the Pokeballs while he was inside the beak, so that when Team Rocket ordered an attack, Meowth could send out a Pokemon that knew that attack. So, like, okay, for example, if Team Rocket ordered Pelipper to use, like, I don't know, Hyper Beam or something, Meowth could find a Pokeball with a Snorlax, and then send out a Snorlax inside Pelipper's beak and have it use Hyper Beam. Obviously, a Snorlax wouldn't work, because Snorlax would be too big, but you know what I mean. That was essentially the plan. Meowth was still hesitant about this, worried that he would fail, but Jesse and James basically forced him to, as they forced him inside Pelipper, and basically were like, yo, you have to do this, whether you like it or not, because Ash and the gang had just arrived. Team Rocket sent out Pelipper first, but before they sent themselves out to try and surprise Ash and the gang, catching them off guard. And they certainly did, because Ash and the gang were shocked to see how fucking huge Pelipper's beak was due to it having so many Pokeballs in it. Seeing the Pelipper by itself, Ash and the gang thought that the Pelipper may have managed to escape whoever the announcers were, not knowing that the announcers were Team Rocket, and questioned what the Pelipper was doing by itself, although admitted that Pelipper was looking much more healed up compared to its battle with Ash at the end of it when it was injured, because Ash essentially thought that the huge beak meant that Pelipper was healthy, utterly clueless of the Pokeballs inside. Ash then sees that the Pelipper was not by itself, though, as Jesse and James come out back in their announcer disguises, which was why they didn't come out immediately in the first place, because they had to take time to disguise themselves again. Ash was instantly disappointed to see that the Pelipper wasn't safe, and questioned what the fuck the two announcers, quote-unquote, had done with Anthony, and how they had acquired his Pelipper. Team Rocket tried to pretend that they didn't know who Anthony was, and seriously tried to pretend that this Pelipper was actually theirs, and asked Ash if he wanted to accept the Pelipper challenge that involved him potentially getting Pelipper for himself if he could beat it, but also Team Rocket getting his Pokemon if he lost. This was Team Rocket's plan to acquire Pikachu. However, Ash did not fall for this, knowing that the Pelipper couldn't have possibly been theirs, since there should have been only Anthony's Pelipper who could use all those special attacks. There just being more than one Pelipper that could do these special attacks made even less sense than there only being one. So basically Ash was like, look, there only being one Pelipper that can do all this weird shit was crazy enough, so I doubt there's two. Ash demands to know what the quote-unquote announcers actually did with Anthony, believing that they must have stolen Pelipper from him. So Team Rocket proceeds to change their story a little bit, admitting that they did get Pelipper from a trainer named Anthony, but Anthony had abandoned it, so they actually saved it by taking it as their own. Ash and the gang obviously didn't believe this bullshit, though, since they knew that Anthony cared about his Pelipper, despite him being a dick otherwise. Essentially accusing Team Rocket of lying, and therefore also coming to the conclusion that these announcers, quote-unquote, must have been bad people, and may have been planning to do bad things with all the Pokemon that they stole from the trainers. So Ash declares that he was going to get all the trainers' Pokemon back from the evil fucks, the announcers, as he sends out his Pikachu to do so. Jesse gets angry at Ash and the gang not falling for their lies, and tells Pelipper to attack Pikachu. Pelipper begins flying towards Pikachu, and Meowth knew inside Pelipper that he had to take action and send out a Pokemon to do an attack. So he sent out a Bellsprout from a Pokeball, and he told the Bellsprout to use Vine Whip. So therefore, Pelipper used Vine Whip, although Pikachu was able to dodge, with Ash taunting that Pikachu was too fast to be hit by a Vine Whip. This leads Meowth to send out a Magby inside Pelipper and tell it to use Smoke Screen. So therefore, Pelipper uses Smoke Screen. And although the Smoke Screen does affect Pikachu, blinding him, the smoke ends up going inside Pelipper's mouth as well, which makes Meowth and Magby almost cough and die. Leading Meowth to admit that the Smoke Screen was a bad idea, as he sends out Bellsprout once again from the Pokeball to use a Razor Leaf to clear the smoke out of Pelipper's mouth and also fire it at Pikachu. However, Pikachu was able to dodge all of the Razor Leafs successfully, leading May, Ash, Brock, and Max to all congratulate Pikachu on doing a great job. Max then decides that since the announcers were distracted, he should take the opportunity to try and find Anthony, believing him to potentially still be inside the gym and perhaps captured. So he heads off inside the gym, sneaking behind Jesse and James. Anyways, back to the battle, Pelipper now flew high above Pikachu, and Meowth sent out Magby again and had him use Flamethrower. But Pikachu was just able to dodge this as well, and the Flamethrower hit Meowth, burning him in the process, making Meowth frustrated as he recalls Magby, deciding not to use it anymore. Meanwhile, as Max was searching for Anthony, he heard some yelling behind a door, and opened it, sure enough, finding Anthony tied up, revealing that Team Rocket had captured him and gagged his mouth, so that he couldn't interfere with their plan with the Pelipper. Max then untied Anthony, as the two of them run out of the gym back onto the battlefield, where Pikachu was still battling against the Pelipper, with Meowth sending out a different Magby this time from a different Pokeball to use another Flamethrower, and then having the Bellsprout use Razor Leaf again. Although Meowth didn't get hit, Pikachu dodged those attacks once again. Ash saw that Pikachu was getting tired though, and wouldn't be able to keep dodging for much longer. Just then, Max and Anthony came running out of the gym, and ran up to Ash, May, and Brock. Being tied up must have given Anthony some time to contemplate on how much of a goddamn loser he was for cheating in all of his battles, so as soon as he ran up to Ash, May, and Brock, he confessed everything, admitting that his Pelipper was essentially botted because he put several Pokeballs inside its mouth and all that shit, and basically all the attacks were just done by other Pokemon, yada yada yada, you know, he basically just explained what we already knew. And he also explained that Team Rocket were in disguises, not announcers, and explained how Team Rocket had essentially blackmailed him into using his Pelipper, otherwise they would admit everything, which was ironic, because now Anthony had just admitted everything, and he still gave Team Rocket his Pelipper anyways. Even though Team Rocket's identities weren't revealed, they were mad that the truth about the Pelipper had been unveiled to Ash and the gang, and figured the only way Team Rocket could be happy now was if they caught Pikachu. So Jesse ordered Meowth to come up with a plan. to capture Pikachu, also telling him to try and not let Pikachu dodge this attack. So Meowth manages to come up with a plan to capture Pikachu, but the plan involved defeating him first, obviously, so he couldn't fight back. Anyways, the plan that Meowth developed after thinking for a little bit went like this. He knew that if Pikachu used Thunderbolt, then the electricity could attract the Magnemite inside Pelipper, and therefore power up the Magnemite, so the Magnemite could use even more powerful electric attacks that could deal a lot of damage to Pikachu. Unfortunately, this plan didn't work though, as it couldn't even get underway, since there were so many Pokeballs inside Pelipper that Meowth couldn't find Magnemites. So this led him to come up with another plan. He remembered that if Pikachu was wet, then electric attacks would do extra damage, and also realized that he could just taunt Pikachu to use Thunderbolt on him, but if Pikachu did this while he was wet, then he would probably hurt himself a lot as well, due to water conducting electricity. So essentially, the plan was now to get Pikachu wet, and then have him shock himself. Unfortunately for Meowth though, just as he couldn't find any Pokeballs containing Magnemite, he couldn't find any Pokeballs containing water Pokemon. But he realized that Pelipper could just use Water Gun on its own to get Pikachu wet, so he simply just ordered Pelipper to actually attack. Pelipper obliged, firing out a Water Gun. However, Ash and Pikachu were both able to dodge this Water Gun, with Ash jumping out of the way and Pikachu jumping to the other side. And Pikachu continued to run away from the water gun, causing the Pelipper to end up shooting the water gun everywhere in an attempt to just hit Pikachu, but ironically, it just ended up hitting everyone aside from Pikachu and Ash. Jesse and James watched in amusement as the water hit May, Brock, Max, and Anthony, but they stopped laughing as they as well were hit with the water gun, which also ended up blowing off their announcer costumes, revealing themselves. Jesse accused Meowth of fooling around and not being able to use a good attack, as she instructed him to use an attack that wouldn't harm Team Rocket, leaving Meowth to panic as he didn't know what to do. To make matters worse, the water gun also ended up blasting both Meowth and all of the Pokeballs out of the Pelipper's mouth, causing Meowth, the Bellsprout, the Magby, and all the Pokeballs to land directly on Jesse and James, knocking them down to the ground, as all of Team Rocket now was almost passed out. Seeing Team Rocket down, Ash and the gang finally noticed that the announcers were actually Team Rocket, although they soon turned their attention to all the Pokeballs that had fallen out, and May obviously comes to the conclusion that these must have been the Pokeballs that Anthony mentioned that he used for his Pelipper, and Ash asked Anthony if this was true, to which Anthony confirmed, stating he regretted it. Just then, Team Rocket get back up, seemingly uninjured, as Meowth yelled that since he had to go through the miserable experience of getting hit by fucking flamethrowers, water guns, all while inside the Pelipper, he felt that he deserved to take all of the Pokeballs that had fallen out of Pelipper, and Jesse and James helped him grab them, as they then got back into their Meowth balloon, and took off with the Pokeballs. But not before putting all the Pokeballs in a bag, and attaching that bag to the bottom of the Meowth balloon to make all the balls easier to carry. Jesse and James then laughed, happy with their capture, but Ash and the gang and Anthony had noticed the bag of Pokeballs hanging from the Meowth balloon, and Anthony realized that since the bag was hanging, it would make it way easier to retrieve the Pokeballs. So he had Pelipper use a wing attack on the bag of Pokeballs, breaking it and causing all the Pokeballs to fall to the ground. Thankfully, Ash and the gang were able to retrieve all the Pokeballs when they fell to the ground, and this angered Jesse and James. But Jesse then remembered that they could still get Pikachu, and decided to get Pikachu so that they could at least say that they walked away with something today. So they then put their suits on that were supposedly resistant to any attack, as Wobbuffet popped out of Jesse's Pokeball, forcing Jesse to recall it. And Meowth then pressed a button in the Meowth balloon that caused yet another metal hand to come out to grab Pikachu, the same one that had grabbed Pelipper before. Ash told Pikachu to use Thunderbolt to try and destroy the hand before it reached Pikachu, but the hand was not affected since it was electric-proof, making Ash and the gang worried. But then, Brock and May got an idea, as the two of them proceeded to tell Anthony to tell his Pelipper to use Water Gun to soak the Meowth balloon, and Pelipper did so, although Team Rocket just laughed and put up umbrellas, not knowing what this stupid Water Gun was supposed to do to them. However, they then realized what Brock and May's plan was, as did Ash, as Ash told Pikachu to use Thunderbolt. And Jesse remembered that water conducted electricity, with Meowth remembering that he had that same idea that he was going to try to use on Ash, and now that was being used against him. So, the combination of the water and the Thunderbolt exploded Team Rocket's protective suits, making them short-circuit, and also exploded the Meowth balloon, sending Team Rocket blasting off. With Team Rocket gone, Ash and the gang and Anthony were relieved to see that all the Pokeballs were safe, and Anthony took back all of his, while he helped Ash and the gang deliver all of the other Pokemon back to their trainers. And Anthony then thanked Ash and the gang for all their help, and declared that he was now going to turn over a new leaf, and promised not to cheat anymore. Also deciding to shut down his unofficial gym as a symbol of the new era he was about to embark on. Max congratulated Anthony on turning over a new leaf, and congratulated him and his Pelipper's teamwork, admitting that while he and his Pelipper did cheat, they were strong, even without cheating, after seeing the Pelipper's final performance with the water gun against Team Rocket. Anthony stated that he now knew that this was true, and he was going to continue to use Pelipper, but he was only going to have it use its natural attacks, and he was going to train it the right way, not using other Pokemon. Ash and the gang assured Anthony that this was a very good idea, and stated their belief that he and Pelipper would get very far fighting honestly, with Anthony happily declaring that with him and his Pelipper together fighting honestly, they would not only win various more tournaments, genuinely this time, but they were going to become battlers that were just as good as Ash and Pikachu, and as Trico and Tailo, finally admitting that Ash was a better trainer than him currently, after all, as he shook Ash's hand, and Pikachu and Pelipper exchanged one final smile at each other, essentially wishing each other luck on their respective journeys. The episode then ends as we see one last shot of Rishin Town, and Ash and the gang continue on their journey to Rustboro City.